Good afternoon, everybody. Doug McGowan, President of Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. Thank you all for being here today. We're in the community of Lucy, which is very near Millington, Tennessee, an area that was hit particularly hard by the storm. What you see behind me are some MLGW crews making some of the necessary repairs to the infrastructure that was damaged during the storm. I'm happy to report today that we have restored power to more than 100,000 of the customers who were impacted, but also acknowledge that we still have work to do. There are 22,000 of our friends and neighbors who still need power restored. And so before I go any further, I want to say to all of those customers, I'm sorry for what you're going through. I know how difficult it can be in the absence of a utility and a commodity that you rely on for your daily life to help you cook, clean, and stay cool, importantly. I also know how challenging it can be for some of our friends and neighbors who haven't been able to leave their neighborhood or even their driveway because of the size of trees that have come down blocking them in. Those trees are many times entangled with electrical infrastructure that our team has to neutralize before that tree can be moved. So again, we understand how challenging it is. I want to thank all of the municipal partners, our county partners, and all of the nonprofit agencies who have stepped up, as they have always done time and again, to help our neighbors in need with cooling centers, with replacement food, with transportation to help them get to critical appointments. Thank you, that will continue. And we also know that one of the important functions will be cooling centers in the coming days, several of which have been already established, and I know that you guys have already pushed those out via your various media outlets. This has been a large effort for MLGW and our partners, just to give you a sense of scale of the kind of damage that has been done to our community. In the last 3 days, our teams have replaced 350 wooden poles, miles and miles and miles of overhead distribution lines. To give you some sense of how big that is, on an average year, MLGW replaces 600 wooden poles through routine replacements, storm outages, so 350 in the last 3 days. On the way here, I learned that we've discovered another 50 that need to be replaced in order to get power back on. And I don't even have yet the number of transformers, switches, and fuses, which will number in the hundreds. For folks who remain off, I want to let you know that we haven't forgotten about you. Help is on the way. Last night, we were able to secure another 15 electrical overhead crews from outside the area. That brings the total number of crews to 117 that are doing work exactly like this all over the community. I know that you may not see them on your street, but just like the neighbors down the street here in Lucy who can't see them from their home, they are restoring infrastructure that brings power to their neighborhood. And so we are aware of how urgent it is to get the power back on in your particular area. Again, I want to thank all of the partners who are helping members of our community. There's lots of information. You can see it on the MLGW website. But if you just don't know where else to turn, our partners at the Memphis Public Libraries and the 211 Information Center, you can dial 211 and they have access to hundreds of nonprofit partners and service providers who can help you navigate. We know it's not just power. Sometimes you have other needs that come up during this period of time, so they are on staff, ready and willing to help you. I know I'll be asked about timing. It will be several days more for us to get the bulk of everybody back onto these 22,000. It's unfortunate, but I would be lying if I didn't say there will be some people that linger into the weekend. You are here, and I hope that the press will get a good look at some of the infrastructure damage that's around us. Some of it is very severe, meaning that we have a very complex restoration process to get everybody restored. It is our aim to get as many people restored as quickly as we possibly can, and that's why we sought all those additional resources. So we understand how urgent the situation is, especially with the heat, and we're going to do everything we can to get your power back on as quickly as we can. And so with that, I'll stop and take questions. No, I cannot assure you that this will never happen again. Just like the folks in New Orleans, when Katrina hit, we're hopeful that there would never be another tropical storm that came through a hurricane. The weather is going to have those kinds of impacts. What I can tell you is that, again, help is coming. Over the next 3 years, with more than $1 billion of investment into our infrastructure, we are going to make it much more resilient and reliable so that we can withstand your typical storms that come through. This one is out of the ordinary, the 6th most destructive storm that we've seen in our history, on par with Hurricane Elvis with respect to the complexity of, for those that have been around, they'll remember Hurricane Elvis, on par with that level of complexity with restoration. But we will see significant reliability improvements, significant resilience in the face of storms. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes. So I want to say 2 things about burying the lines. There are neighborhoods today that have their infrastructure underground that are without power, because the power comes to those neighborhoods in overhead distribution lines at some point, whether it's from the generation point, the transmission point, down to the distribution system. So it's always going to be susceptible. That is a conversation we can have, but I want everybody to know 40% of our infrastructure is already underground, 60% is overhead. The estimate that we have that I've given before is that it will, at a minimum, double everyone's base electric bill forever to bury all of that infrastructure underground. And so I know people are struggling to make ends meet, rent, utilities, food. And so I want to be mindful of that, and we want to make sure that we invest every dollar to get the most return on that dollar. And I want to just emphasize, just because it's underground does not mean that it is impervious to outages. We have significant number of outages that are underground today. So that is one part of the solution, but there's a lot of other technological things and hardening that we can do. Vegetation management is most important. I mentioned it yesterday. I am asking City Council at the next meeting to approve $220 million over the next 5 years to get us back onto a 3-year cutting cycle. Historically, 40% of our outages are just due to trees and vegetation. That is much higher in the case of this storm and recent storms. If we get that back, we will have at least a 50% improvement in reliability just by doing that and replacing old infrastructure. What other questions? Yeah, so we have emergency funds for this. There has been an emergency declaration. I know that the mayor of Shelby County is going for a federal declaration. There is a reimbursement threshold through FEMA that will help us reimburse some of this cost. So this will not have any impact on anyone's utility rates, because this is built in to the kind of operation that we do. Any other questions? Yeah, I will. And since we're being specific, I would just like to correct the record and say it's been 3 days and 18 hours. So we're not yet at the 4-day. Remember, Sunday at 7 o'clock is when the power went out. As of now, it is exactly 90 hours and 10 minutes that the power's been out. I understand that that is still too long. Every day that goes by is still too long. So I am suggesting that into tomorrow, we should have a substantial amount of the restorations done, but there will be some number of customers that will linger into the weekend. Okay, so I think I heard that. This is the question was about the call-in where customers are getting an indication that it's the first time they're hearing about an outage. Our team brought me a solution this morning that they have implemented, so I would encourage people, if they are still seeing an outage and they think that we don't know about it, to report it. I want to explain one more time just how the system works. Our distribution system is made up of 400 circuits. That's the main circuits that bring energy to our neighborhoods and serve about 1,100 or 1,200 customers. When we restore power to that circuit, the system assumes that everybody's back online. That can mask a problem in one of the laterals that serves a particular street. So when customers may get a message that they're back on, that lateral may be out. When we fix that lateral, we will say, you're back on. But quite frankly, there could be a transformer that's off that lateral that's out, and so we have to go fix that. And finally, when we fix the transformer, there can be between 4 and 10 families on a transformer. We'll say, you're back on, and they will say, no, we are not, which means there's a problem from the transformer to their house. The reason that that is an issue is because we cannot see through the entire system to pinpoint today where the problem is. Some of the improvements that we're going to be making will give us a better idea of the fault location so we can more quickly get to it. I know that's frustrating. I wish I had universal view of every outage, but we have to discover it while we're restoring. I know that's frustrating to individuals, but it's helpful to us to know that you're still out. Keep the price of the poles down, or the number? Oh, well, like I say, we plan for 600 a year as part of our infrastructure improvement. The good news is that we had more money in there to replace more poles for the long term to improve that reliability. So I'm not concerned. The wooden poles are really not the most expensive part of anything that we do. I appreciate the question, but that's not going to be a material impact. It's just a lot of labor and a lot of work to install those poles. But I want to mention, it's not just the poles. The crew behind me can set that pole very quickly. The work comes in taking that distribution line and setting it back on the poles, putting the cross arms, reattaching the transformers, and making sure that everything functions again before they move to the next pole. So a pole out is not in and of itself a giant undertaking. It's putting all of the infrastructure back on it and then connecting it to the next pole and the next pole and the next pole. Oops. Well, so there's little you can do in the next 30 days besides make sure that you're as ready as possible for the next storm. That means having people at the ready, contractors at the ready, and then looking at your critical infrastructure and things that you know that need to be replaced, replacing them. In the summertime, it's difficult to take things off for maintenance because our load is very high with the heat and the number of air conditioners that are running. And so you really don't want to take something off because then you could risk overloading another. So it's a challenging time to do it. We try to do that what we call the shoulder seasons, spring and fall, when the load is very low. And we have made substantial improvements to our distribution networks, our substations, those kinds of things. So, yes, sir. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That was going to be my final point, and I appreciate it. The guys who do this work are incredibly dedicated to the people that they serve. We want to make sure that they do this restoration safely. The work they do can be dangerous. That's why they take a lot of safety precautions and why they are very deliberate in what they do. You will see the crew here working in the heat and in the sun. There are times when the lines are energized and they have to put thick rubber gloves and sleeves on over top of their fire protective gear. And so making sure that they're hydrated. We have water on every truck. We have Gatorade delivered. We're asking them to take breaks on a regular period of time to get in the shade and take a break. And we are actively monitoring. We have some of the members here who are part of our safety department that go out and routinely monitor crews, make sure they're well hydrated, make sure they're well fed and well rested. But it is an arduous job, and the dedication of these folks cannot be overstated. And I am very thankful that they've chosen to do this work for us. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing your question, sir. Well, it's certainly, the heat does impact the ability to work quickly because everybody's working just a little slower. But that's why we asked for some additional resources, and we're thankful we were able to get them so that we have more hands on the laboring oar, as they say, to get this work done. Sure. Yesterday we asked, and we continue to ask everybody to make sensible choices. We always recommend in the summertime that your thermostat is set to 78. We know that the demand is highest for electrical power when you first wake up in the morning and when you come home to your house in the evening, especially the evening when the temperatures are high. So we're asking during that period of time particularly that you avoid adding extra electrical load. If you have an electric dryer, maybe dry your clothes later in the evening when the sun has come down and the temperature is lower. Avoid running your dishwasher until it's overnight. Anything that reduces the amount of electrical demand. And I understand that 78 to some folks sounds like, gee, that's really warm. Step outside, step back in, and I guarantee 78 degrees is going to feel really cool when you step back inside. Any other questions? Yes. Well, I can't guarantee a break on their electric bill except that they will not be charged for electricity during those days because they're not consuming any electricity. So you should expect that your bill will be slightly lower by the number of days that you're off. Any other questions? Thank you all for making the trek out. I do sincerely appreciate it. I'm hoping you'll be able to capture some of the physical damage in an area. This is a small snapshot of what's happening all over the county. So thank you all for being here.